Online. We welcome you today to another one of our Minamata Online sessions. We've arrived at Article 11, which is the one on Mercury Wastes. We hope, of course, that we find you well wherever you are right now. We can see again that we have participants from all sides, both East and West. So thank you very much for joining us. It gives me, of course, the opportunity to explain to those that might not be familiar with Minamata Online that this is our Secretariat endeavor to try to be as close as possible to our parties and stakeholders at a time when some of our usual work in a face-to-face setting would have been interrupted. We hope that these information sessions that we are giving are of use to you, and you have seen, if you have been with us earlier, that we've been running them since September. And there's a catalogue of other articles that we've described until now. The Minamata Online sessions have been organized in 3 streams. This stream is the one on implementation, review and support, the stream of work that I lead. Another one is on Minamata Science, and that is led by my colleague Claudia. And then we have a third one which looks at preparations for COP4 under the guidance and leadership of Monica Stankiewicz, our executive secretary. For those of you that don't know me, my name is Claudia and I'm the Senior Policy and Coordination Officer of the Secretariat. But I welcome you to today's session and also have with me a whole group of excellent colleagues. Firstly, Marianne Bailey, who is the Program Officer for Capacity Building and Technical Assistance for the convention. Also from our sister convention, Melisa Lin, who joins us from the BRS Secretariat, of course, is a Program Officer there and has special responsibilities also vis-à-vis the Basel Convention in particular. I'm also very happy to be joined by our colleague Anan, who many of you may have seen more in the back of some of our work, but who is very much front and center and works on science and technology matters and will be addressing us today as well. And also special thanks to Stéphanie Laruelle, who's of course no stranger at all to the Minamata world, but who comes from the UNEP chemical branch and specifically from the Global Mercury Partnership. So thank you very much to all of you for joining us today and for being part of our unpacking of the Article 11 of the Minamata Convention. And with that, let me perhaps jump into everything from here. So as next slide, if I could have the next slide, yes, this one. Our session is structured in this way. I will start with a very, very short overview, followed by Marianne to take us into the provisions of Article 11, the provisions of the Minamata Secretariat on Mercury Waste. Thereafter, Melisa will take us into the technical guidelines on mercury waste and the provisions under the Basel Convention, which are closely related to our work. And then Tak will give us a snapshot of the information that we currently have as they are reported from MIAs and reports, and also just to highlight that intersessional work is ongoing on mercury waste. Of course, we won't have much time to discuss it here, but this just as an information piece. And then Stéphanie will take us into the specific work of the Mercury Partnership, so with regard to waste. And then we would like to make time available for questions and answers. There's a lot of information we impart to you in these different presentations, but please feel free to at any moment already record any questions or queries or anything you may want for clarification or for discussion in the chat box, and we shall return to that a little bit later and hopefully are able to give you some more of those perspectives. So with that, just as the next slide, I will just show you 2 short slides. And if you've been with us in some of our previous Minamata Online, neither slide will be new to you. In the previous sessions, we have taken you through many of the other provisions that underline and make up the logic, so to speak, of the Minamata Convention, which is, of course, to the primary objective to ensure that human health and environment is protected from the harmful effects of mercury. And to do so are a number of control measures, which can be summarized into, on the one hand, keeping mercury in the ground, and on the other, to reduce the use and presence of mercury in our economy, our industry, and society, so as to reduce its emissions and release it into the environment, and then with consequent health and other impacts. To take us to the next slide, the Minamata Convention is set up in a life cycle form. And so by the time now that we are on Article 11, we've come sort of to the tail end of this life cycle. We had looked at where mercury comes from and what the provisions of the convention are in terms of the supply of mercury. We had looked at where mercury is used, or where it is unintentionally or intentionally it becomes emitted. And so we looked at all of those aspects. And today we're coming to the last part, so to speak, of this life cycle, namely what to do with mercury that is no longer used for use, that is in fact waste mercury, and how to go about this. A special feature, of course, of mercury is that it cannot be destroyed, and so the point very much is for the parties to the convention to look at the long-term management, sound management of mercury waste, of mercury that's no longer in use and no longer required. And this is very much what this article seeks to address, and which we'll be walking you through. I just want to make one last comment, because often in our world of environment, we are looking at circularity and the economy of circularity and the economy of recycling. But it is, of course, one feature of Minamata that the intent is not to recycle mercury for continuous and abundant use, but rather to taper down the use of mercury and the need for mercury, so that we may have a much smaller amount to deal with, and therefore can manage that smaller amount in a responsible and a sound manner. With that, I would like to invite Marianne to take us into the specific provisions of the Minamata Convention on mercury waste. Please, Marianne.
Thank you very much, Claudia, and hello to all our participants. So glad you could be with us. I want to start with the basic obligation of Article 11. The most basic obligation is set forth in paragraph 3. And paragraph 3 tells us that each party shall take appropriate measures vis-a-vis mercury waste. And those measures deal with environmentally sound management, they deal with recovery, and they deal with international transport. And I will walk through those a little bit later. But first, the paragraph 3 tells the parties that each party shall take appropriate measures so that mercury waste is managed according to these 3 aspects, taking into account the Basel Convention guidelines. And in fact, Article 11 opens by saying that the relevant definition of the Basel Convention on the control of transboundary movements of hazardous waste and their disposal shall apply for parties. And for non-parties to the Basel Convention, they are to use those definitions as guidance for all wastes covered under the Minamata Convention. In the next slide, we can see the scope of Article 11. Article 11, in its paragraph 2, says that mercury wastes means substances or objects consisting of mercury or mercury compounds, containing mercury or mercury compounds, or contaminated with mercury or mercury compounds in a quantity above the relevant thresholds defined by the Conference of the Parties in collaboration with the relevant bodies of the Basel Convention in a harmonized manner, that are disposed of or are intended to be disposed of or are required to be disposed of by the provision of national law or by this convention. So I realize that's quite a mouthful, but it's important to know that the convention and all the parties to the convention are talking about these three different categories of waste. Now, in the next slide, we can see that the scope is further subject to thresholds and exclusions. I mentioned the thresholds already. Paragraph 2, again, after listing those three types of mercury waste, goes on to say, in a quantity above the relevant thresholds defined by the Conference of the Parties, in collaboration with the relevant bodies of the Basel Convention. So there is an intersessional process. There has been an intersessional process ongoing, and that intersessional process will report to the next Conference of the Parties, COP4, in November 2021. And I'll give you a bit more detail in a moment. And there's also exclusions in paragraph 2. The exclusions are overburden, waste rock, and tailings from mining other than primary mercury mining, unless they contain mercury or mercury compounds above the thresholds. So my colleague will talk a little bit more about the intersessional process and those threshold and exclusion questions shortly. But I do, in the next slide, want to give you a little bit about the state of play on the thresholds. So in the COP decision 3/5, so that was taken at the last Conference of the Parties late last year, the parties decided that no threshold needs to be established for waste consisting of mercury and mercury compounds, such that waste listed in the table of the annex to the decision shall be regarded as such mercury waste. In other words, it will be subject to the provisions of Article 11. They further decided that no threshold needs to be established for waste containing mercury and mercury compounds. So those are mercury added products that are disposed of, intended to be disposed of, or are required to be disposed of, including those listed in Table 2 of the annex to that decision, and those will be regarded as such mercury waste. Again, therefore, they are covered by the provisions of Article 11. The decision also extended the mandate of the group of technical experts to develop thresholds for waste contaminated with mercury or mercury compounds. Now, to go back to the basic provision, in the next slide, we see paragraph 3A. So as you'll recall, the basic obligation in paragraph 3 is that each party shall take appropriate measures. So the first detailed aspect of those measures is set out in paragraph 3A, that waste will be managed in an environmentally sound manner, taking into account the Basel Convention guidelines in accordance with the requirements that the COP shall adopt in an additional annex, and the COP shall take into account parties' waste management regulations and programs. Now, our convention is still very young, so that work on developing an additional annex is not done at this stage. Paragraph 3B goes on to say that the wastes can only be recovered, recycled, reclaimed, or directly reused for a use allowed to a party under the convention or for environmentally sound disposal. And the disposal was already discussed in paragraph 3A. And finally, in paragraph 3C, the wastes are to be not transported across international boundaries, except for the purpose of environmentally sound disposal in conformity with this article and with the Basel Convention. And in circumstances where the Basel Convention does not apply to transport across international boundaries, the party must take into account relevant international rules, standards, and guidelines. So there you have a fairly simple yet comprehensive approach to the management of mercury waste. The article then goes on to provide instructions on cooperation. So in the next slide, you can see that the COP is to seek to cooperate closely with the Basel Convention bodies on the ESM guidelines, and that parties are encouraged to cooperate with each other and with relevant intergovernmental organizations and other entities as appropriate. And we're very pleased, and hopefully you will get the sense from this session today that that is already going on in a very strong manner, and all are working together to achieve environmentally sound management of these wastes. So with that, I turn us back to Claudia for our next on the agenda.
Thank you very much, Marianne. Before handing over to Melisa, I wanted to make the comment or the reflection that when the particular waste article was under consideration in the negotiating times of the INC, and particularly I recall the early morning sessions of a particular waste contact group around how to interact and, in fact, to interact with the Basel Convention. So from the beginning, there was a strong sense from many what would be parties that our two conventions should be interacting and should be working each in their own areas of strength on this important topic, in other words, on waste. So with that, I'm very, very pleased to have Melisa with us today and to ask her to walk us through the work on mercury waste as it is under the Basel Convention. Please, Melisa.
Thank you, Claudia. Good morning, participants. And I'm very glad to be here and to have been invited to be a panelist on this webinar. As Marianne has mentioned, all mercury wastes are to be managed in an environmentally sound manner as defined by the Basel Convention. The concept of ESM is central to the Basel Convention, but its definition in the convention is very broad. And I'll read it. It says that environmentally sound management of hazardous waste and other waste means taking all practicable steps to ensure that hazardous waste and other waste, which include mercury, of course, are managed in a manner which will protect human health and the environment against the adverse effects which may result from such wastes. So that's a very broad definition, and parties have worked over the years to develop a number of guidance to come to a common understanding as to what ESM means. Until recently, there was an expert group that was set up, and it just finished its work 2 years ago on coming up with this common understanding of ESM. And it has developed a number of guidance documents, mostly addressing policy-related aspects. When it comes to ESM of specific wastes, the Basel Convention has developed over the years a number of technical guidelines to address ESM. And the one on mercury waste is just one of the many guidelines. We have guidelines on a number of other wastes, namely on POPs, which addresses the waste from the chemicals regulated under the Stockholm Convention, for example. The technical guidelines on mercury waste were adopted by the Basel Convention in 2015. And the updates to the guideline has been motivated by the Minamata Convention. The most recent mandate to update this guideline came in 2019 through decision BC-12/8. The decision set up a small intersessional working group, SIWG, and this group is open to parties and observers. So if any one of you is interested in understanding more or even contributing to the work on technical guidelines, you're welcome to join this working group. Next slide, please. The work of updating the guidelines is usually led by a country. In the case of mercury waste, the lead country is Japan. The small group has already developed 3 drafts The latest one has been shared this week, and it will be discussed at the online meeting of the SIWG to be held in December 2020, that is in a few weeks from now. Next slide, please. So, as mentioned, the definition of ESM is very broad. And I think if you look at just the outline, this is the table of contents of the guidelines, you can see the breadth of aspects on the management of mercury waste that's covered by this concept. And so it doesn't just pertain to management per se, or disposal, as sometimes people think of when they think of ESM, but it covers a number, a very broad range of measures, ranging from identification, inventory, to emergency response, and the guidelines even has guidance on awareness and participation. So I'd like to emphasize here, though, that the transboundary movements of waste is, of course, a very important aspect of the Basel Convention. And there's the description of what is required for mercury waste in the section on legislative and regulatory framework. But this guideline, of course, cannot go into details about how these requirements are to be implemented, because the same requirements apply to all hazardous waste and other waste under the Basel Convention. And we have a number of guidance documents that provide more detailed information in case you're interested. But in general, whenever a mercury product or mercury reaches its end of life, then and it meets the definition of waste as explained by Marianne earlier, then it falls within the purview of the Basel Convention, and its trade or transboundary movement has to be undertaken in accordance with the requirements of the Basel Convention. In essence, this means applying the prior informed consent procedure. That is, an exporting country has to notify the country of import and the countries of transit of its desire to export a waste, and this shipment cannot happen until the exporter receives written consent. In addition, what's also important to note is that the export can only happen if there's a indication that the disposal of the mercury waste in the importing country will be undertaken in an environmentally sound manner. So this is to protect the developing countries that could otherwise be targeted for exports, and to ensure that any disposal, wherever it happens in the world, is done in a way that's protective of human health and the environment. So if you're interested, as I mentioned, there's more information on this topic in the section on legislative and regulatory framework. I'll also emphasize that there's a large section of the guideline dedicated to waste prevention and minimization. And these two aspects of waste management are integral to the concept of ESM, although that's not widely understood. And as explained by Claudia, in the case of mercury waste, the point is not to generate and recycle mercury, but it's to end up with a minimum amount, and that can be more easily managed. So the guidelines go into quite some detail about this, and makes reference to a number of tools that have also been developed under the Minamata Convention, for example, regarding ASGM. In terms of updates undertaken for these guidelines, an important part has been to reflect the outcomes of decision MC 3/5 on mercury waste threshold. So, for example, there's been lists of types of mercury waste that have been adopted by the COP, and this information has been integrated in various parts of the guidelines. Of course, the work under thresholds by the expert group is ongoing, so the update of the guidelines in that aspect is, of course, not completed. And there's probably going to be in the future more work to be done in that regard, and in cooperation with the expert group on mercury waste threshold. Yes, so on that note, I think I will stop right here. And if you have any questions, I'll be happy to take them at the end of the presentation. Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, as I already mentioned, the guidelines have been updated, taking into account decision MC 3/5, and which invited the bodies of the Basel Convention, in this case, the small intersessional working group, to take into account the decision. And this has been done or is being undertaken right now. In addition, the secretariats cooperate regularly in making sure that the two expert groups are aware of each other's work. And of course, we participate in both groups so that we can support the experts in any way they need in bringing knowledge from one convention to the other. Also, parties and stakeholders were encouraged by decision MC-3/5 to provide comments on the draft guidelines, and the Secretariat of the Minamata Convention has disseminated this the invitation when it was made on the update. So now we are looking to revising and finalizing this draft through the meeting to be held in December, and hopefully be able to provide a draft that could be considered for adoption by the next conference of the party to the Basel Convention in July 2021. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Melisa, both for spelling out exactly where and how the baton gets handed from the Minamata Convention over to the Basel Convention in terms of the work on mercury waste, and also to show the depth of detail that is in the technical guidelines, and last to reflect on the work that is currently ongoing also between the two conventions. And of course, Melisa is part of the work on the Minamata side by as a Basel representative, and my colleague Claudia is our Minamata representative in the work of the Basel Convention. So there's very close interaction between our two conventions at a technical level, at a secretariat technical level, in this regard, to recognize that, and also to recognize Melisa and Isako's work. I now turn to Anan to give us a snapshot of what we know right now. Minamata is only 3 years old. Basel is a much longer lifespan, of course, but we already have a little bit of information that we can see at a Minamata level. So, Tak, please.
Thank you very much, Claudia. So today, I would like to guide you through the information that we have received so far on the issue of mercury waste, and highlight some of the intersessional work on this topic. So if I may have my next slide, this focuses on the national priorities that were identified in the Minamata initial assessment reports. And so far, we have received 52 finalized reports, and 39 of them have been reviewed. And all the reports are uploaded on our Minamata webpage. And I think most of you are already aware of this, but mercury waste management are common issues for many countries, together with the issue of mercury added products. So as you can see, these two topics are identified as the most priority actions in these countries. And there are other relevant priorities, such as interim storage of mercury and end-of-life products, and also improving wastewater treatment systems. So those similar topics related to mercury waste management is also identified in these reports. And MIA also includes detailed figures of the, for example, of the amount of processed mercury wastes and mercury emissions and releases from waste management processes. And we will be further looking into those data as we receive more finalized reports. And my next slide focuses on the national reporting, the short biennial report, which was due by the end of 2019. And we had one question related to Article 11 mercury wastes. I'm asking about the facilities for final disposal of waste consisting of mercury or mercury compounds in each party. And as you can see in the pie chart, among 19 reviewed national reports, 19 parties have responded that they have identified facilities for final disposal of these mercury wastes that consisting of mercury or mercury compounds. And for your information, these initial national short reports are already uploaded on the Minamata website. So if you can go to our webpage, there's a tab menu called Countries, and under that menu, you'll find a page titled Reporting. So you can find the previous submitted reports under that webpage. And the next slide, in my next slide, just to remind you that the full reporting ahead of us is due by the end of 2021, and this also includes, this also would include one question related to Article 11 mercury wastes, and this is asking about the measures that was taken within the parties on the issue of mercury waste and the effectiveness of those measures that has been taken. And according to the COP3 decision MC3/13 on guidance for completing the national reporting format, the Secretariat will prepare a guidance document to assist parties to prepare their full national reports. Moving to the next slide. I want to briefly highlight what has been discussed during these weeks, during these months, on the intersessional work on mercury waste thresholds. So the overview has been explained by my colleague, Marianne. So just briefly going through, the COP decided that no thresholds need to be established for waste consisting of mercury and mercury compounds, and that we refer to the table 1 that was attached to the decision. And no thresholds need to be established for waste containing mercury and mercury compounds, and we refer to table 2 of the attached, that was attached to the decision. And the COP extended the mandate of the experts group to develop thresholds for waste contaminated with mercury or mercury compounds. So this is the part of the current discussion that's being held at the intersessional experts group. And in the next slide, further looking into the decision from the COP, it was decided that at present there is no need to develop thresholds for overburden and waste rock from mining other than primary mercury mining. And the group, the experts group, was requested to work further to establish thresholds for tailings from such mining, and was also requested to conduct analysis of whether tailings from ASGM should be subject to a threshold. And in response to the request, the Secretary is working on the improvement of National Action Plan guidance regarding management of tailings in cooperation with the Global Mercury Partnership. So on this topic of Global Mercury Partnership, my colleague Stéphanie will further explain to you later. So that would be the end of my presentation. Thank you for your attention, and I hand back to Claudia. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Tak. We now have with us Stéphanie, and before she starts, I just would like to, from a perspective of Minamata, say that the United Nations Environment Programme, Chemical Branch, and others have, of course, over the years contributed enormous scientific and technical knowledge on which the negotiations towards this convention and now the work of this convention can rely in the form of assessments and other technical papers. And with that, also the Global Mercury Partnership, which has a long history, as Stéphanie will just tell us about as well. That is a very, very important resource, not only in terms of knowledge and expertise, but also in terms of networks and outreach opportunities. So we are extremely happy to have Stéphanie here, both from the perspective of UNEP, but also the Global Mercury Partnership. And also just to say on the topic of waste, which is a specific partnership area. There's also within UNEP, of course, a center based in Osaka that specifically looks at waste. So there's a wealth of information that gets produced, which we can rely on. With that, Stéphanie, please.
Thank you very much, Claudia, and thank you for the opportunity to be with you all today for this Minamata Online on mercury waste. Next slide, please. Thank you. So, as Claudia just said, an important aspect of UNEP's work really relates to the development of knowledge and science. And on the screen, you can see some of the reports and assessments that have been developed over the last years on mercury, such as the Global Mercury Supply, Trade and Demand Report, or the Global Mercury Assessments. I won't go too much in details in presenting them today, but I just wanted to highlight a few elements that may be of relevance for our discussion today. So if we look at the 2018 Global Mercury Assessment, which has been developed in close cooperation with AMAP, the Arctic Monitoring Assessment Program, emissions from waste, including from mercury added products, represent about 7% of the inventory. On this slide, you can see a snapshot of an interactive map that has been developed using the data of this 2018 assessment, and which allows you to search mercury emissions by country and by sector. It's a nice tool to use. I'll share the link in a moment. UNEP has also developed a global mercury waste assessment released in 2017. And this work has been done by the ITC Center in Japan. This report looks at the practices in mercury waste management in about 30 countries, and it highlighted some of the challenges faced by a number of these countries in the management of mercury waste. Another interesting tool that since 2005 UNEP has been developing and maintaining is the Mercury Inventory Toolkit, which provides countries with a methodology to assess their emissions and releases of mercury, and over 19 countries have been using the toolkit to set their priorities as part of their MIAs. It has been recently updated, actually last year, to reflect some of the recent knowledge as well as feedback from countries, including with respect to waste, where mercury input factors were revised downwards for several mercury waste categories. And this was in recognition of the possible overestimate of these emissions. Finally, an issue that has been discussed in the COP context relates to the need for data on emissions from the open burning of waste, and UNEP has been conducting since 2018 mercury monitoring at open dumping sites together with the Japanese Ministry of Environment, and the aim is to have the results of this work available for COP4. Next slide, please. Thank you. So UNEP is also providing support to countries, and just a few highlights. Amongst others, UNEP is assisting a number of countries in undertaking their MIAs, and in this context, to better understand the global sources of mercury and further develop the toolkit, UNEP has been working with the Biodiversity Research Institute to actually analyze the available inventories produced as part of these MIAs. And this analysis of the about 43 inventories highlighted the importance of waste and its open burning, and however, noting there is significant uncertainty in these estimates on waste due to the difficulty of actually knowing the country-specific input factors. UNEP is also working closely with WHO as well as with other partners to develop JEF-funded projects on mercury-added products such as dental amalgam, medical device, as well as cosmetics. And all of these projects will also be looking at the end of life, of these products. Finally, another example of JEF project developed by UNEP is on the phase out of mercury self-alkali plants in Mexico. And this project will include plans for stabilization, storage, and final disposal of the mercury waste that will result from the decommissioning. Turning now to the Global Mercury Partnership, as Claudia said, it is indeed a very interesting instrument to support action on mercury. In a few words, just for those of you who may not be yet familiar with the partnership, it is a voluntary network that brings together today about 200 partners from governments, but also intergovernmental and non-governmental organizations, industry, as well as academia representatives. It was initiated 15 years ago by a decision of the UNEP Governing Council with the goal to protect human health and the environment from mercury. So it actually preceded the Minamata Convention, and for which it helped build momentum and supported the negotiations and implementation through the provision of knowledge, tools, science, and expertise. Today, the partnership focuses its work really on supporting the implementation of the convention, as well as on providing knowledge and science, and on delivering outreach and awareness raising. It is supported by an advisory group, which is currently co-led by Rogers Ankara from the United States and Terapon Werwuktikorn from Thailand. Its work is structured around partnership areas, and including one dedicated to mercury waste management. So work happens in the context of the partnership areas, but also in a cross-cutting manner. And for instance, this year, consultations have been initiated on topics identified as cross-cuttings, namely mercury from oil and gas, and mercury from non-ferrous metals mining and smelting. Finally, as Tak mentioned, the partnership works in close collaboration with the Secretariat of the Minamata Convention, including on intersessional work. So the Mercury Waste Management Partnership area is one of the largest, actually, which brings together today about over 100 partners. It is led by Misuzu Azari from the Kyoto University and by the Ministry of Environment of Japan. Over the years, the waste partnership area has contributed with a number of guidance and tools. You can see one displayed on the screen, which is a catalog of technologies and services on mercury waste management. The idea being to disseminate information on such products and services offered by partners. It is updated regularly and made available through our website. The partnership also collaborates with other partnership areas, for example, the one on chloralkali, to look at the needs and the challenges faced by this industry in the conversion process, and also in addressing the issue of managing and disposing of the waste. And a number of partners are also currently involved in the cross-cutting activities carried out by the partnership, in particular the expert consultations, which I just mentioned, and where the waste aspects are important. Finally, I would like to draw your attention to the meeting that will be held in a couple of weeks of the Mercury Waste Management area on 27 November. This meeting will review ongoing activities and also look at future priorities. The participation will be open to partners, but also to other relevant stakeholders. So if you're interested, please do not hesitate to contact us. This meeting will be an opportunity to discuss technologies and services provided by partners, and also look at the needs faced by countries in the management of mercury waste, as well as opportunities for matchmaking and including with respect to capacity building, outreach, and awareness raising. So thank you very much. This is it from my end, and I'll be very happy to respond to any question you may have.
Thank you very much, Stéphanie. Thank you to each of you for your very, very valuable and informative contributions. I'm now going to hand over to Marianne, who will have looked at the chat box and the question and answer box, and we see some questions coming up. So Marianne, can we place ourselves in your hands just to guide us through? And may I just invite anybody to put any questions for clarification or discussion into that box, and we shall try our very best to respond appropriately. Marianne, please.
Thank you. Great. I'm going to start with an interesting question from Terence, who says that technical guidance on final disposal of mercury waste is not lacking, but developing countries are concerned about capacity and cost. So is assistance available from the international community? So Claudia, I'd like to turn that one to you.
Thank you very much, Marianne. Thank you, Terence, for a question that is fundamental, of course. I will not be the only one speaking to this question, but also already invite Esako as well in a moment. The point about being able to implement the very good scientific and technical and other guidance that is there is, of course, that it needs to be supported also with the required resources. And so this is a very important topic. In many ways, what we are trying to show through our presentation right now is that there are various different actors or groupings that are trying to be as helpful as possible in this regard. We also do have a financial mechanism where some of these kind of areas of work can be accommodated, and there is already some work going in some countries in this regard. You asked specifically about final disposal, and of course you will have seen that that is one of the questions, or the only waste question that was asked at this particular round of the first report. And so it is a very important information point that we are now gathering and going to be able to look at, and this will be important for all those working also to support countries to reflect upon in terms of the availability and suitability and the reachability in that, as not every country necessarily has a final place of disposal or would perhaps even want to have a place of final disposal. So the answer to this is not direct or straight, but it is in fact part of the ongoing steps going forward. What I would like to point out is that we have seen both within the GEF portfolio areas of work that very much look into help to waste minimize and to help into countries to put in place the appropriate measures in this regard. But also we have a number of applications, and maybe even Marianne would like to speak to this a little bit, that we have seen coming forward in the specific international program, the much smaller but equally important part of the financial mechanism, where countries are making a very specific, taking a very specific look at what they have, what they don't have, and how to try to put in place what they need to adhere to the obligations and to enable themselves to do sound management of that. So this is said it before in another way, waste management is a very long term and a very multiple steps type of work, and we will probably be returning to this topic again and again. And you are right, of course, that what countries that are bigger, that maybe have industrial facilities like chlor-alkali, what they need is of a completely different state and level in terms of the quantity of mercury they may need to ready for final disposal, as opposed to countries where, say, small island developing states or other states that have basically mercury waste from where would it be light bulbs or batteries or any of the other kind of products. So mercury waste is definitely not an equal topic in all countries, but it is an equally important topic for all countries. But may I perhaps invite Isaku and Marianne to reflect further on this? Thank you.
Thank you, Claudia. I do not have much to add, but as Claudia mentioned the reporting of this year, I'd like to note that this year's reporting was only about the final disposal facility for the mercury, the waste consisting of mercury, and which is quite limited for example, recovered mercury from chlor-alkali plants and so on. So these, of course, the disposal of these mercury consisting of mercury is quite a challenge, but at the same time, in many of the cases, the responsibilities are quite clear. In terms of the mercury, the waste containing or the contaminated with mercury, I'd like to note that the Minamata Convention takes the life cycle approach that addresses the source of mercury and reducing the use of mercury at the source, so that the arising mercury waste will be as small amount as possible, so that it shouldn't be too much a burden to developing countries. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And I will just add, in terms of projects supported through the specific international program, Claudia is right that there have been several so far. We're in very early stages of the SIP and of its implementation, but there are several projects that address mercury wastes, some specific to mercury added product waste, but some a little bit more broadly. And so we'll be interested to see the results of those and share information between countries and other stakeholders about how those projects are advancing when they get a little further down the road. And those projects are specific to direct capacity building and implementation support for PERVs. So there are many different types and levels and sorts of programs that are needed to come together to address this problem. With that, I'd like to turn to a second question that came in from James, and he says, concerning mining waste for tailings, are only mercury mining tailings going to be considered, or is it generally tailings from mining more generally? And he notes that in Zambia, we'd like to know more about the content of our tailings as well as slug, which date back as far as 1900. So Isaku, can you take that?
Yes, thank you, Marianne, and thank you, James, for this question. And indeed, this is a bit difficult to understand, difficult sentence to understand in the Article 11, which says that the definition of mercury excludes overburden waste rock and tailings from mining, except from primary mercury mining. So what it means is that the primary mercury mining is excluded from the exclusion, which means that the waste from primary mercury mining is indeed a mercury waste. And also says that unless they contain mercury or mercury compounds above threshold defined by the competent parties. So for other minings, for the mining of other metals, the tailings from these mining activities will be regarded as mercury waste if it exceeds the threshold that will be set by the competent parties. And an expert group is working on the definition of on the threshold for the discussion at COP4. Two remarks about the other points. One is about the slugs, and if you talking about slugs from the smelting and roasting, I think this is not regarded as mining waste, and these are indeed mercury waste if it exceeds the threshold to be set by the competent parties. And secondly, you mentioned the tailings from the activities in 1900, and if the tailing is in the closed mines, it may be regarded as an issue for the contaminated sites, Article 12, rather than the mercury waste issues. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Isaku. I am not seeing any other questions at this point. If I'm missing anything, one of my colleagues will speak up, but otherwise, Claudia, I'd like to turn it over to you to wrap us up.
Thank you very much, Marianne and Isaku as well. Just reflecting on also Isaku's point at the end that, of course, there is also another article on contaminated sites, and in fact, we will be having another session on Minamata Online where we delve a little bit deeper into that one, and perhaps we can speak more on that day. Just before closing, I just wanted to also say that if you, of course, have any specific questions on the Basel technical guidance, Melisa would, of course, be able to speak to that even after the session. If you have some dues, just send it to us and we'll be happy to do that. And also in terms of any help that you might, or information that you might want to get from the partnership, Stéphanie will of course also be happy to assist you. And the upcoming meeting for the partnership on the waste partnership meeting in particular might be a good place to bring also some of the questions we even heard here, as I'm sure that part of the partnership would like to actively think through some of that as well. So if I sort of may, on Stéphanie's behalf, just invite you also to reach out to the partnership and link in there and also bring some of those considerations there. We really didn't get another question, but we thank you very, very much for being with us today. We know that there's a almost oversupply of meetings lately, so we are very mindful that it is indeed a lot, and we thank you that you did decide to make the time to be with us. If you have any feedback on the session, otherwise, as we are also making preparations for our plans of how to be close to you virtually and otherwise for the next year, please feel free to let us know. There is a feedback element at the end of this session. Please feel free to give us any feedback that you might have in that regard, and we shall try to build that into our follow-up work. Thank you very much on behalf of all of us, and even those that you don't necessarily see right now speaking, but they are busy behind the screens. Pablo and Lynn, I didn't thank you for your work earlier in the earlier session, but of course you are doing that. And behind all of us is, of course, the rest of our secretariat. So just to say thank you to all of them as well. Thank you to you, and we hope to see you soon again. And keep well and have a good day or evening or morning, wherever we might find you. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye, everyone. Thanks.
Thank you very much.
Goodbye. Thank you.
Bye. Thank you.